Hey guys, this is Tarot with Kittens, Weights, and Tarot, and welcome to part 3 of our 5D panel. We were looking into, in part 1, the shadow side of spirituality. In part 2, we were talking about our unique daily practices. The links for those videos are down below, so definitely go check them out. But today is our third and final part, and that is our higher self and our 3D life. So how do we take all the downloads and everything that we're connecting to with our higher self, and how do we bring that into the 3D? How does that help us navigate the 3D? And we're going to be getting into maybe parts of the ego. Is the ego needed? We always talk about ego death, and are there parts of it that we need? Do we not need it? What does our higher self say? So I'm excited to jump into this. We have our wonderful homies here. We have Liesl and Dana and Heather and Suzi here on this panel. They're going to be weighing in with their thoughts. Everybody comes from diverse backgrounds and opinions and points of view, which I think is what makes this panel amazing. But also we are asking you, the viewers, to put your comments down below. Anything that is triggered or something that you thought of while we were speaking, make sure you put it down here. We want to expand the discussion. This is all about discussion. None of us considers ourselves any type of guru. In fact, we probably want to stay away from gurus from some of our points of view. We just want to learn. We want to learn more. So that's why we talk about things that we know, and we want what we know to be challenged. We don't want that to be set in stone. So okay, I have a question for you guys, our higher self and our 3D life. Okay, let's see. Maybe we'll start off with this one. How have your downloads that you've received and the relationship with your higher self affected your 3D life? So all of your downloads, your connection to that higher self, how does it affect? It could be positive, negative, or neutral, doesn't matter, but how has it been affected? Any examples? Or so maybe you guys can even think of your spiritual awakening, when you became aware that there was a higher self. I myself, I probably can't pinpoint an exact date for you. James can give you an exact date and probably time, but me, I can't. But when you were aware that there was something that was more than just this 3D self, and when you started listening to that, how did it make an impact on your life? How did it change your life? Maybe should be a better question.
Well, when I started receiving downloads, and I think we all get downloads, it forced me to stop blaming other people in my life, because I had a very traumatic childhood. But at a certain point, we need to take responsibility and to heal. And so one of the things to help me get past the ego and to, I call it ascending to the higher self, is I've been doing a thing called recapitulation. It's hard to say, to recap. So I will go to a certain thing that still, if you still have inner turmoil or unease, or you're uncomfortable about looking at a situation, maybe with somebody, and you don't feel good about how it went down. It could be 20 years ago, even. It could be last week. With doing the recapitulation is I try to see how I could have responded better, how maybe I didn't see the other person's point of view. And what I'm trying to bring it back to is, in this life, it is my mission to ascend. I want this to be my last life, and I do believe in many lives. And without taking a look at my own responsibility, what did I do wrong? That doesn't always give somebody else a free pass, but it really has helped me forgive myself. I have a lot of shame, and that is one of the lowest frequencies, guilt and shame. So you can't do this overnight. Uh, the gentleman who taught this said he took 4 years to go his whole life. And you're not going to pick uh, Bob at the supermarket. It's not every moment of your life, but key things in your life. As early as you could go back, it it's sort of a release. It brings on a forgiveness. And I have noticed, and I'm trying to state this with humility, I have and doesn't mean I have more work to do. I'm only on about 4 recaps. We'll just call them recaps. 4 recaps of some very painful events. And now I see the other person's side. I see my side, and I see where I could have done better. And if they could have done better, at least I could see, hey, uh, nobody's perfect. Uh, Forgiveness. And that really goes back to the Honoponopono that I pronounce wrong is please forgive me. I'm sorry. Even to myself, I'm sorry. I thank you and I love you. And that actually becomes quiet to zero limits. Zero limits. You are no longer limiting yourself in the frequency of grief, fear. Those words, just saying them, GBs, operate in gratitude. So that one way, and I have talked about that a few minutes. I've listened to more on death of the ego and that little came this role before.
Oh no, Susie's breaking up a little bit. Okay. Yeah, I think
Oh
she's still.
darn! You guys not hearing?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
you're
sorry. You guys didn't hear any of that.
bits and pieces. It was cutting in now.
Oh darn.
Oh
Okay,
my.
we'll just move on. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened. It
Well,
was really good.
well, yeah.
Okay.
I was like getting the bits and pieces and
No,
putting it
I
to like some good stuff. So, well, the internet it it does what it does. So it just waves in and out. But yeah, for anybody else, kind of maybe weighing in, that connection, to your higher self, the things that your higher self has taught you, the union it's brought, maybe with your human vessel. Anything else that maybe you guys have learned, come across?
Yeah, I would like to add in on that. I feel like when I reconnected with her, with that part of me, it really helped for me to start listening to my guidance and my intuition. That's what I really feel like she is, like within me. Even though we say higher self, it really is within me, that aspect of myself. And it's funny because I have seen myself. I have done a reading with Tara, who is amazing, by the way. And she saw me as a fairy, which is so spot on because I have seen myself in that aspect of me. And I've seen myself as an angelic too, which very much resonates. And I feel like when we see our true essence of ourselves in that way, it's very liberating because that it's a free like a freedom aspect of ourselves. Maybe at points if I felt trapped and I think of her, I'm like, no, I'm free. It's like that reminder of freedom for me. And I feel like it's actually really, really deep in my self-awareness. I don't know if I would have ever became self-aware if I haven't tapped into my higher self. I don't know how one could even without that sort of function, that we have the capability of doing, and was very much, I feel like, hidden from us over the years. And we've never taught to tap into ourselves that way, tap into our intuition. And it's really something that we self-teach. Sometimes the higher self will reveal itself through points when we've, went through some sort of trauma, kind of part of the awakening process. And that's how it was for me. It was through this sort of traumatic awakening that she showed herself. And I don't think I would have been able to see her without it, because my walls around me, what this construct is, whatever anyone wants to reference it, needed to be knocked down in order for me to see it, because it was walls that were built, around me. And it's definitely deepened my my self-love, it's deepened my compassion, it's deepened my self-awareness, my consciousness. I've seen myself in meditation as well to go even deeper, and this was actually a recent revelation that I had, and something really, really happy to share. It was very personal for me when I came to this discovery of myself. But I was in meditation and connected with my higher self. And for the first time, I just saw myself as this pure, huge light being. And I was told I am nothing and I am everything. And I wasn't a male nor a female. And it was this moment of pure peace. And I feel like maybe not everyone is in such a way, because I don't know where everyone comes from. I feel like we're so complex. But that was in such a way where I am in my soul essence. And I felt like it gave me such a peace that you can't attain unless you tap in that way, and that was really my point of my tapping in. And and who knows what's going to happen as I keep connecting in that way, how we expand. Because again, going back, it really goes to show what I thought my higher self just was, 10 years ago. She's expanded and grown with me. And maybe because of all of the different layers, because the quantum world is much more than interesting enough, when this is kind of the looping of spirituality, is we can get very stuck with just deities, very stuck in a certain way, not realizing it's quantum, not realizing it's parallel, not realizing all of these versions of ourselves. So I feel like having this very well-rounded sort of view, and not kind of just seeing things, okay, I'm spiritual, I have this altar, I do this, which goes back to even what Tara was saying. This is all about expansion. So seeing all of these different aspects and incorporating the spiritual, but with quantum and all these parallel versions, I don't know, it's so magnificent, and could really get, how do I say it? Could really broaden horizons to things that we don't even realize. So I'm excited to even get to know her even deeper, or him, because I feel like at that point I was not male nor female. I was everything and nothing at the same time. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share as for me.
That is beautiful. Very well put. Anybody else wanted to weigh in? Maybe Liesl or Heather?
Yeah, sure. Having listened to everyone else, it prompted a few things in my memory. Like Suzi was saying, someone said to me years ago, when there's a bit of a conflict with someone else or whatever, see your part in it, which has obviously been mentioned already. There's a certain peoples, I don't know who it is, it might be Polynesian or somebody, who don't actually have like a plural word for waves on the ocean. Like, it's one wave, if you like. Every single individual wave is just one thing. And that's kind of how I tune into the higher self, really. Is that because I can check out with people, if I'm sort of getting a little bit agitated or whatever. But I sort of tune into that. So I kind of try and blend in with everything that's around me. Find that takes me to a bit of a higher space. I did have quite a spiritual awakening actually when I was about 25, because I had a car accident. And when I was in hospital for a little while, I just kind of, I don't know if it was just a feeling of, yay, I'm still alive or whatever, but I did have quite an awakening around that time. And I think one other thing, again, I'm not a Buddhist, but there's a meditation called and I can never say this, I think it's the Metta Bhavana, which is a very similar thing. It's like, it's well-wishing, but first of all, you wish well to someone that you really love. And then it's someone who's just pretty mundane. So it might be someone that works, in the local store. You don't really know them or whatever, but you see them every day. And then you well wish for someone that you really don't get on with or whatever, who's kind of gets you back up or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I can't say that I've done that for a long time, but in the early days, I did practice that quite a bit. And I did find that it actually took me to a bit of a higher place, because you're not actually judging people like I said earlier, really, when things are all hunky-dory and what have you, it's easy to sort of feel spiritual, and maybe a lot of that's your ego, I don't know. And again, you can get very sort of emotive if it's someone you really don't like. But I found with the sort of mundane person that you sort of really don't know, that was the most difficult one. I don't know why that is, and to this day I don't really know. I'm kind of off on a bit of a tangent here, so I hope that makes sense anyway. But yeah, quite simply put, that's what I would say, really.
Are you done, Liesl? Okay, I didn't want to interrupt you. I was just sitting here listening to all of you, and you guys all made a lot of valid points. I think I realized, because I've been through a lot in my life, I've always been connected to my higher self. And a lot of it was out of protecting myself. And I've always known that there was something there and everything would be okay, not realizing that was the connection to my higher self. And then as I've gone along in my spiritual journey, it started slowly and just kind of catapulted, like Liesl said, wave after wave after wave. It just little things, little things, little things, little things. And then you realize you have that connection to your higher self, and it's not outside you, it is you. And you're the one who embodies that. It's just learning to tap into that and recognizing that you have the wisdom and the information, and learning to trust yourself, learning to trust your intuition, and knowing that you're not wrong in a lot of things, and a lot of things that we do pick up on, a lot of things that we second guess ourselves on, is learning to really, really trust yourself and have that commitment to yourself is a big, huge thing for me. And I channel a lot of stuff. So I feel like I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Memento, where he's writing everything down. So I have sticky notes everywhere and index cards everywhere. And I had to learn to focus that in a little more of a fashion instead of being so scattered, which you get better with it at a time, and learning to connect to it is a lot easier. And you can go into meditation or whatever it is for you. Sometimes it's like I have my own little cloud, and I can just go, okay, what do I need to know? I listen, and I just trust the intuition and whatever I'm drawn to or whatever I'm needing to do. And I just listening to yourself, because you are that higher self. And that's kind of my gist on it.
Yeah, just kind of going off of what you're saying about trust. I think that's the, at least in my perspective, one of the bigger hurdles to really listening to that soul, that higher self, whatever you want to call it, in my eyes, the being that is the real you, and we're just kind of wearing a suit temporarily, and we've, I don't know, went to the store, picked out some hair, picked out a skin color, picked out some clothes, picked out a region we were going to be born in, but it's the, everything in our world is meant to, or at least the matrix world, meant to keep us in that 3D frame of mind. Don't trust anything that you can't see, feel, taste, touch, hear. Don't trust that sixth sense, because that's only for special people, that they might, I say they, whoever they are, maybe trying to teach us that it's only for special folks, or it's those people are just crazy. Dismiss them. They have nothing to tell you, nothing to share. And if you yourself are feeling those things, don't tell it to anybody. Just keep it within. It's kind of the programming. And so I think it's very hard for people who are experiencing their higher self to really trust what it's saying and just release, and go with it and live in it, because you're basically stepping outside of the matrix, which is a very difficult thing to do, and it can be a very scary thing because you've been taught this is the world, this is all there is, and when you step out of it, it's like, whoa, where's my foundation? There's no books on this, really. Like what I'm going to do, because everybody's experience is unique. So yeah, surely, yes, there's spiritual books out there, but for your personal experience is going to be unique from everybody else. And so, like for me, I guess you guys were kind of jogging my memory. I'm like trying to go far back. I'm like, when did I really start like experiencing things? And it was when I was a kid. My segue was through spirits. That's, I've not seen them with my physical eyes, but always with my third eye. I could feel them. I could hear them. They were in my dreams. When both of my grandmothers passed away, which was in the same year, they were both in my dreams. When my cousin, who I was very close to, when she passed away, and she was pretty young, she was like 34 when she passed away. She came to me in my dream and told me exactly how she passed away. And she says, make sure the family knows that I wasn't a suicide. They're going to think it, but that's not what happened. And so she told me everything. And I would believe my dreams and I would believe my feelings, but I had a hard time saying it because it made other people uncomfortable because they were uncomfortable within their own, connection to their higher self. So it'd be like, my dad would call me spooky. Oh, you're so spooky. Get out of here with your spooky stuff, and so, and my brother, he actually saw spirits with his own two eyes. And so the two of us are seeing things all over the place. And we felt so awkward, in the matrix world. And yeah, so I think that could be something that's difficult for folks, is when you're getting all this other information, but it isn't vibing with everything the 3D world is telling you. So it's like, do I go with it? Or do I just think that that's just a bunch of hogwash and I've gone Looney Tunes, and do I stick with this 3D matrix? And I think that's kind of the choice. Not everybody, but some folks have to come across. And for me, it was like, well, at a certain point, I think I like had this mental like volleyball match in my head, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm just gonna go with it. People already know I'm weird, so I mean, can't get any weirder, I guess. So might as well just go with it. But yeah, so that's my thoughts on that. But you guys were mentioning things about the ego as well. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that, in your opinion, people need the ego? Or should we destroy it? Should we release it? Should we do away with it? What do you think?
Okay. Yeah. Well, basically, yeah. I think we do need the ego. Otherwise, we wouldn't eat. We wouldn't sleep. It gets your basic needs met. I think basically a lot of, well, with all us human beings, the ego is sort of taken over a little bit from the heart center, and so maybe it's a bit out of control, but I think it does have its place. Obviously, I mean, it's often said, isn't it? If we were still living in the wild and like a tiger came along, then we'd need to know either to fight it off or run away or something like that. And I think that's where the ego sort of comes in. But yeah, it can be a real hindrance as well. I think perhaps as a species, like human beings, we've got a little bit too sophisticated for the ego. Do you know what I mean? And that's it, really. Yeah, just kind of, that's my first thought on it anyway. Thanks, Dana.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like we live in a world of polarity, and we live in a certain vibration where it is required. I think where people get a little bit caught up, like, we have to also understand that the ego is there to protect us somewhat. I don't feel like everyone has to be self-sacrificial, and we have this notion of spirituality that you need to self-sacrifice yourself, and I don't feel that that's the case. I don't feel that's what someone's purpose, so to speak, is. And I feel like the ego is kind of there to help us have that self-worth. I feel like the ego does have its purpose, even as far as for the material world, because I'm not trying to say, please, I definitely don't mean material is everything, because it certainly isn't. But I feel like there's been this sort of stigma associated between spirituality and people being successful. And I feel as though when we start to, and that's also the ego saying it's okay to be successful and be spiritual. You don't have to. And it's funny because being spiritual, it's like people come from a place of judgment about those things. So I feel like the ego was there because if you're living in a comfortable environment for you, the ego helped you attain that. So you have like a nice house and you're comfortable in your home and you're able to do your practices and be your best self. But then also too, obviously you're helping humanity with it, of course, like that energy exchange. But I feel as though people have this notion that you have to kill the ego completely. I think when you're in other frequencies, it may not be necessary. Maybe if you're in a certain place, frequency or vibrational wise or dimensional, however you want to word that, it may not be necessary. But I do feel like us being here, having this experience that we want, you need to have that as a whole. So I don't feel like killing something, a part of us, off. I think what happens is in the beginning, the ego kind of takes over due to trauma. So I feel like that's where the imbalance happens as far as for the ego stuff. The ego comes in, wants to protect, wants to talk you out of things, wants to basically control everything. And it kind of throws you off course because you're not listening to your intuition or whatever. So there has to definitely be some sort of a balance. But I do feel like there's points where the ego has to step in a little bit and say, hey, this isn't going to happen right now. Whereas, you can't, in this world, unfortunately, because there are beings who are service to self. I can't imagine if we were all self-sacrificial, what would happen to us if we didn't have an ego to be like, no, like we need to have healthy boundaries. Like I feel like we've associated to say, I don't have boundaries, you can do as you wish and please. And the ego is there and it's like, no, there's boundaries, you have this. And that's a healthy ego. So I think we have to like differentiate. I'm sorry, I can't get the word out, between what an unhealthy ego is. I feel like is more the question. What is the unhealthy part of the ego and what is the healthy part of the ego? Same thing with spirituality. What's the unhealthy part of that? Or maybe something in excess, as opposed, I feel like we're here to experience balance. That's it, like as simple as that. Maybe some people, their soul does call for an experience to have a little bit more of that spiritual aspect. But I feel as though like maybe in my past lives, I've been more of an ego person and my soul wanted to experience that. And that's okay. Doesn't make me a bad soul or a bad person. It's just in those lives, that's what I wanted to experience because it got me to experience the more spiritual side and then to see the balance between the two and to integrate things for the soul. So I feel like it's much more complex than I think what people kind of make it out to be, to say you need to kill your ego off completely. I think we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of it first before we try to just start demolishing parts of ourselves. I mean, that's how I view that.
All right, so definitely some interesting points. I'm like over here, like my wheels are spinning. Suzi, did you want to jump in there?
To answer, do we need the ego? We do, as you mentioned, for survival. However, the lowest vibrations, like guilt and shame, anger, hate, these type of things, pride, I think they can be transmuted. I don't want that kind of ego. I want to transmute it with love, And I wanted to read something I wrote this morning. I wrote, I trust that I am exactly where I need to be and that everything is unfolding for my highest good. Now, what I want to add to that is we don't get this right all at once. It's a step-by-step progress. If we are going in the flow of the universe will support us. The passion we feel about something, taking that risk, will be supported by the universe. May my thoughts, words, and actions be in alignment with my highest self. And may I radiate peace and positivity to all and those around me and myself. So I want to take the parts of the ego that work with me for driving me forward, but leave behind the muck, the low energy. And I just wanted to share that. That's something I wrote down this morning.
Yeah, I definitely love that point of view and that visualization. Leave all the lower vibe stuff behind and anything that would hinder us, and let the rest of it come along with the higher stuff.
Yeah, I think that's great as well. Just wanted to add. Thanks, Susie.
I have, like, something I read a long time ago is we couldn't experience separations from source and individuality without it. It kind of anchored us into originally, and it's integrating it because a lot of the time, like we were talking about, it's at a trauma, it acts as a protection mechanism, but we need to be able to integrate the ego so we can become into balance and harmony. So that's just like my gist on the ego. We don't need to destroy it. We need to integrate it.
Yeah,
That's it.
That was so good. Yeah. I
a
love
lot of
that.
different good points. I'm like, where do I even go with this? I'm like, this is so cool. I would say for me that the ego, and looking at it in a positive light, helps me to see where my healing needs to be. It shows me where my traumas lie. My higher self, it's great. I love my little blue avian higher self, but the human vessel has all these things it's soaked up throughout its years. It's traumas, it's programming, and all of these things. And in order for me to feel like you guys are talking about balance, to get into that balance, I think that when my ego does flare up, or when my shadows do flare up, which is usually through my ego and everything, it's showing me, hey, girl, like, this is where you got to heal. You haven't healed this yet. Maybe you've healed some layers, but there are some more layers for you to go through. And it's much more apparent for my human self to see that, especially when I got James back there pointing it out for me, which is good too. But I think that in its most positive light, it's also there in an effort maybe to help us heal, or maybe that's not its purpose, but it does help us. I think in that fashion. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that was still needed healing, or that wasn't solved yet. But that's my 2 cents on it. Let's see. I had some other things. Well, just kind of like any other thoughts you guys had, kind of in terms of higher self, 3D world, and I guess we can even go into current downloads from your higher self. Anything that you're wanting to bring into the 3D, through this, internet and people watching, maybe something that they can think about, things that your higher selves have told you, so that maybe this is something we can integrate into the 3D. So I don't know if you guys got thoughts.
This is really quick. There's a gentleman who's legit. His name is Count Fortune Saint de Germain. He's a relative of fortune Germain, who was like in France in the 1700s, an alchemist. And I got an opportunity to ask a question. He's a very older man, but I asked him, how do we defeat the darkness in the world? And that can apply to the shadow side of ego. And he said, on a daily basis, there is a light wolf and a dark wolf. Dark wolf meaning the anger, the fear. The light wolf is compassion and love. And he says, do you know that old Native American saying? He said, every day, take a few minutes out. And I was honored that my question even got answered, because this is a very, very educated, connected person in this world. He said, ask yourself, which wolf do you feed? And that comes all the way back to when I told you, Tara, I honor the white wolf. I want to honor the white wolf that is love and compassion. And then you shared with your KWT tribe that the white wolf is sort of a protector of your lands. So I just thought I wanted to share that. So thank you.
Yeah, that's as you were saying, I was like, wait a minute, yeah, the white wolf here. When I was tapping into the energy of the land that we're living on now, I was met by this it wasn't really a spirit, but an energy, and it showed itself as a white wolf, and it says, I'm the spokesperson basically as the guardian of this area. But yeah, I mean, speaking of bringing, higher selves into 3D, I mean, it's for me, following my intuition, even though my ego, my programming was telling me like that it's not a fruitful path. Don't go down that path. It's scary. You don't know what lies. It's just fear. It was fear, 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 fear. And I understand the ego wanting to protect me in that fashion, but it kind of becomes a helicopter parent at that point and kind of smothering. It's like, okay, well, I know you mean well, but I got to go do this. And so, coming out here, just the energy here has brought up so much and has so quickly, like so many traumas, so many shadows that I didn't even know were in there. I thought I knew myself pretty well, and turns out I don't know myself that well. With all the things that come up here, and which is why I was like, this is where there needs to be a retreat. This is where I think that would be a good bridging. I know that there's many retreats out there. I know there's tons of spiritual retreats, but I just feel that the energy here is so beautiful, and I connect to it so well. James connects to anybody who comes here, even if they don't consider themselves spiritual. They come here and they're like, something's up with this area. Something's feels weird. Even the guys that dug our well, they didn't know what was going on. They said they were working late one night till 10 p.m. and they ended up getting their guns out of their truck and keeping it on their hip, because they said that they felt that they were being watched by people they couldn't see, and they couldn't, their brains couldn't wrap their head around that. And they're like, we couldn't get away from your property fast enough. And they were like, not that your property's anything's wrong. We felt we were at home, but at the same time, we felt that there was 100 eyes like watching us, basically. Like, we're just kind of like, we're like, finish up, or maybe we'll just finish tomorrow. But I'm just like, this would be a great place for, I think, people to really get in touch with the higher self, the soul, source. Freaking sun is so powerful here, getting in touch with that energy, getting in touch with the land and the animals, and bringing that into their own 3D realm. What does that mean for them? What kind of healing that could bring for them? I know it's not going to look the same for everyone, but yeah, I think yeah, just bringing up the white wolf, I'm just like, yeah, man, this is gonna be freaking amazeballs. But yeah, did you guys have any other thoughts?
I think I would just, one thing I'll just take away from everything, well, a couple of things. Balance is so important. It's something I've really made a conscious effort to be very aware of. Knowing the world that we live in, where everything has to be of balance. And I feel as though the shadow doesn't exist without light and the light doesn't exist without shadow. And I feel as though, like, Silver Star was saying, integration is what's most important. I don't feel like one can be without the other, if that makes sense. I think that, and Tara had even channeled on this, and I've resonated so much with that, where beings of service to self actually help the service to others and vice versa. And that is a huge message. I think bigger, and I'm getting goosebumps reiterating this, than people actually realize is that one does not exist without the other. I think that there's certain points in consciousness that in the higher realms, that's where we are, and it has its purpose. And I think that we are where we are right now to have a certain experience. And I think having more acceptance of that empowers us, leaves us out of a victim mentality, leads us out of the shame and guilt, because it's very, very interesting when we start to realize what the soul had asked to experience and how we're all interacting with one another. An interesting aspect about astrology is that you can see even potential children in there, or you can see your grandmothers, or you can see ancestors. So it goes to show how much of the free will do we have, and what's the combination of us being here. And I feel like that should give us a little bit more peace about things, more acceptance, more, the contracts that we have with people, what these pains allow us awakening processes. Like, would you have been able to awaken without this trauma? In my experience, I had to go through immense amount of trauma in order to awaken, and I am grateful for every single step of that. And I'm not a victim of those circumstances. If anything, I'm grateful for all who have contributed to where I currently am. And I think that's what's most important for all of us, is to understand that this is part of our growth, and whether we asked to be here, if it was a collaborative effort with the universe, who quite knows? It's all very unique to each and every one of us, but to not be victim to it, because that we are not. Staying in balance is very, very important, to honor ourselves and those around us. And I feel like when we start to live by that, it's the acceptance that really helps, because it leads to this expansion of, our consciousness, which is what we want to do. It's part of the ascension process. So that's where we would hinder ourselves, if we feel like, that's like, I feel like another trap, we have to get rid of this, we have to do this. Well, how about we just integrate it all? It's probably what we want most. So that's what I wanted to touch on with everything with that.
Okay. This is one thing I say a lot, and I wrote it all down so I wouldn't forget. Like, a lot of it is, without the shadow, without the light, you wouldn't have that contrast. And a lot of people get stuck in a trauma loop, and they get stuck in that victim mentality. It's breaking out of that trauma loop. It could apply to so many facets in our lives. It's just seeing that you're stuck in that loop and figuring, okay, well, what can I do to change that? What can I do to move towards where I actually want to go? As somebody who's been through an immense amount of trauma, I've had to do this myself, so I completely understand it, and not taking up the victimhood and taking back your power and letting that have power over you anymore. And a lot of things that we need to do is, like you were talking about, the white wolf and the black wolf. It's like, what are we feeding? Like, what are you feeding into? And it's being conscious of what you're consuming on every single level and putting your energy into. And the last thing I wrote down is how can we as spiritual beings bring more unity and integration and transcend that separation that has been created, because it's not us, them, it's coming together that needs to be harmonized. And when we can do that and have open discussions so people can actually heal on a deep cellular level, I think that will make a big difference. But I don't think we are anywhere near that with humanity right now. It's going to take time.
Yeah, I wanted to, Dana and Heather, talking about kind of the balance in the light and the dark and getting out of the victimhood. And that's something that luckily I get reminded about when I'm just human. So I fall back into my own victimhood, when I think I'm all good with my traumas from my childhood, and then something will come up and it's like, oh no, that's got to get healed too. But in my perspective, I'll catch myself, or James will catch me pointing blame at somebody, like they did this to me, and now I hurt, and I keep that hurt. And he's like, well, why? He says, like, talking about my own mother, and I received a lot of trauma from her, and I know that she probably received a lot of trauma from either her mom or dad. I'm not sure, but he was like, you should be thanking your mother for what she did. And at first I was like, what? I should be thanking her for all the things she did to me. And he's like, no, he says, think about it. He says, from before you came here, he says, she said, hey, I'm going to take up the job of being evil mom, and I'm going to do things to you that's going to make you grow. And it's going to get you to see light and dark, to get you to understand what victimhood is. He says, and she played this whole.
Yeah, I think you cut out, Tara.
It's always at the most important message it does, I swear.
I know. It's like they don't want this important message to get out.
We do that.
And
I
by
really,
they, there's she's probably gonna.
She'll go out and come right back in.
Oh,
when the
it's
frequency
been so
is being
incredible connecting with everyone here. I have to tell everyone it's been an honor. Truly.
It's been a wonderful experience. I know exactly where she was going with that.
Me too.
Somebody says, I love you that much that I'm going to go to this lifetime to do this for you.
Also, I have really bad trauma with my mom, and it still consumes me. So where I got cut out earlier when it was acting up, what I was trying to say is I still try to think of one thing that maybe I can actually smile about, because there's not a lot to smile about with the relationship with my mother or what happened growing up. But once in a while I find something, and it allows me to show compassion towards her and towards myself, and it starts bringing forgiveness, because if we hold resentment against someone, it only comes back and sits like a black hole in our body. So this is something I'm trying to work on. We don't have to make excuses for people, but it could help in our healing process. I just wanted to add that.
Sorry,
that was beautiful, Suzi. Welcome back, Tara.
Oh my goodness, it was so weird because the internet stopped, and I was like, oh no. So I was gonna check my phone because it's going off of my mobile hotspot, and the phone just decided all the juice just got sucked out of it. And
wow.
I'm like, okay.
That's where we're saying the most high vibrational messages do that, I swear.
Yeah, we were like, I was hanging in like this.
We're like, no!
Started feeling all kinds of energy back there. So yeah, it's just, I'm like, there's a lot of energy going on right now. I mean, people and entities and whatnot. I'm like, they're just like breathing down my neck at the moment.
Would you mind going over what you were saying about your mom? Because I felt like then it cut out.
Oh yeah, that's when all the and everything.
Yeah, it was like I was so into what you were sharing.
Oh, yeah. So it was just that, basically, he said she took on the most loving role that she could take on, which was the role of uh, someone who hurts another person. In order for that person at a soul level to grow, he says, sure, at a human level, should parents be abusing their children? Of course not. He said, should those kinds of things happen? Of course not. But she took on that role because she loves you so much. He says, maybe, he goes, look at your mom as a soul. That soul loves you so much that she came down to earth and was willing for you to hate her, for you to throw daggers her way. And she said, I'll do it because it's going to help her. And he says, so you can say whatever you want about your mom. And he says, and maybe at a human level, sure, you're entitled to say that. But at a soul level, she did you a service. So he says, you should be grateful for that. And you should say thank you. And I was like, okay, well, when you put it that way, I understand. I said, but still, there was trauma. But I see the other point of view. So, yeah.
It's always painful to reflect. And I see James's point. But I also will tell you that you're such a light in this world, and it makes me want to cry. I'm so sorry that happened to you, and we love you. So that your mom sounds like perhaps she was traumatized, but then thank goodness, Tara, with you it ends, and that's the blessing of maybe these lessons. Sometimes we have generational, and I think even in my family we've had that. So kind of the buck stops with you, Tara.
Well, I think that's kind of what I feared when I was thinking, do I want to have kids someday? And this and that. And I think when I was a teenager, when my mom would say some things about, I can't wait for you to be a mom, blah, 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 but in a negative fashion. And I said, I'm never going to have kids. I don't want kids, and I said, because I don't want to hurt them. And so that just kind of like stuck with me, but it was making a decision from a trauma-based mentality, that I don't want to bring a life into the world because I feel that I would just become my mother, or I would become my dad, or things like that. Not that those two people inherently they're not bad people. They have their own issues, they have their own traumas, and they don't know how to work through them. And so the way they work through them was to hurt others because they were hurt in some form. And I can see that when when I'm being very objective, but sometimes the ego does come up, and I can get very into my ego, and I can get very blamey. But here we go again with the ego. The ego shows me that, hey, that's something that you still have to work on healing, because in the end, these are not gods. These are human beings who had a kid, didn't know what to do with that kid, had some traumas, had some shadows, and they took it out on that child. And it's like, but now maybe I can help them, and maybe and while I'm trying to help myself. And who knows? I don't know. I'm only 41. Maybe I will have kids someday. I don't know. Or maybe I'll just stick to fur babies. I'm not sure, but but yeah. So well, that's my thoughts on that, I suppose.
That makes me happy.
Something that was said to me a long time ago, because I kind of knew where you were going with that. I was told, close your eyes, see your parents, see that injured little child, put them on a stage, and send them love. Because they were just very hurt people, and then they chose to have children. And that helped me recognize that they were just very injured people, my parents, who didn't know how to be parents. And yeah.
Yeah, Heather, I love that. That kind of, yeah, I'm quite moved what you just said. Because I looked at it slightly different, you know, like, I thought, yeah, I mean, I had a lot of trauma, especially with my mother, to be honest, and like, but I kind of took, not a defiant view, but I kind of sort of always thought of it like, I wouldn't change a thing about my life anyway, because everything that's happened to me has got me right here where I am now. But when you said about put them on a stage and all that, yeah, that kind of turned it around a bit, you know. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. It's quite profound.
You know, I was thinking about like this past year, my dad had overcome prostate cancer, and when he had it for a while, and it was kind of like this on and off thing, and he started getting, like, he never really looked at his own mortality before. You know, he always put on this really strong front. You know, he still weightlifts. You know, he's still this weightlifter guy, even though he's like 82 going on 83, but he always wants to look tough and strong. And this prostate cancer put him in a position where he had to rely on his wife, my stepmom, who's pretty awesome. And he had to be vulnerable. He had to accept that he can't just throw a punch and knock something out and make it go his way. That this thing was going to make him sit down. And I ended up telling my dad, I was like, well, if you think of a prostate, it's a very male thing. I said, so I know that you have issues with my grandfather, who's passed away now, but don't you think that prostate is trying to tell you that there's something on the male side of you that needs to be healed? And he's like, well, he says, I definitely have a lot of trauma from my dad. He says, and a lot of things I wish that if he were still here, I would say to him. And it was just like, just this trying to help him heal and putting aside anything about any trauma that he inflicted on me, not for like forgetting it or anything like that, but just seeing him as a guy. He's just some guy who is suffering from something right now. He's hurt, he's scared, he feels a little lonely, and he has issues with his dad, with his mom, and they passed on, a long time ago. And it was like I got to see him in this whole new light, and I was like, oh, okay, let me help you. And all of a sudden it wasn't Papa anymore, but Chris needs help, So I think that it's good to look at our parents objectively, even if they were the most hunky-dory parents in the world, but just to look at them as they're human beings, and they're in this little flesh suit. They're trying to navigate the world just like you. They make mistakes just like us. Some, inflict trauma on others, and, but we're all just learning. And, to kind of demonize somebody, I don't know, we got to take a look at both sides, of that situation. But anyway, any other thoughts on all this? This is a good discussion. I like it.
Just one thing I'll add, and it's sorry. I'm sorry, Silver Star. You want to talk?
Oh, no. I was
just going to say something that has helped me, a couple of things along my journey with some traumatic experiences back then, and what I've worked through now. Like, one in regards to my father, he passed away when I was young. I was 7 years old, and there was a lot going on with that. And over time, I've come to realize that the forgiveness is really for me. It's not for him. I feel like I had to release myself from the trauma and understand, like Tara was mentioning, that he's a human being having an experience himself. And in hindsight, I don't know, sometimes we don't know the contracts that we have with people and what it entails. And yes, that trauma really led to me to start to heal something in order for me to help facilitate healing for others if they feel called to me in that way. And I feel as though for me, Earth is a school. I do feel like some people call it a prison planet. I really don't know. For me, it's a school because I am a student of the universe and I just like to continue to learn. I also feel like one other thing that's really helped me along the way is understanding that forgiving someone for the traumas that we have experienced with them, the forgiveness part doesn't disregard the emotional or traumatic aspect that we have to go through the healing. And I think when, sometimes it's like one of those things when someone says, oh, like, it's good to forgive. And right away we're like, what do you mean? They did this, this, and this. And we go into that whole kind of spiraling. In hindsight, what I really have gathered over the years is to say you can forgive someone, validate your emotions, because I feel like a lot of these things we just want the validation as well, to say like this happened, like we want to feel heard, maybe at the times, especially when we didn't. And for all of that, that's going to be very unique. But for me, that's what it was, is I wanted to be heard with it. I wanted the cries to be heard. And realizing that just because I forgave someone didn't invalidate what I felt. Therefore, it actually allowed me to release myself from the trauma in the situation and to really step back from, I don't want to say a logical sense, but with more clarity, because my emotions weren't so tied into it. And I was like, okay, I could forgive this person. That didn't mean that I still didn't have healing to do separately from that, but I was able to forgive and release myself from that trauma. And that was a really big game changer for me. It was something that had happened when I was in an abusive relationship with someone. And I realized where someone was in their consciousness and their awareness. Again, this isn't excusing anyone's actions. It's just having an understanding of people and our interactions with one another, whether they are lovers, whether they are parents, or whomever we're having these experiences with. Kind of like almost to a degree, some may feel that the stacks were made against us when we first came here. So I think if we come from a place of compassion, knowing our own mistakes and where we've lied, and maybe we have been the bad guy, so to speak, in someone else's story, we kind of have more compassion, I think, all around. And this isn't something that happens overnight. It's something that happens over time. And with all of our own paces, like this is nothing that someone can rush or tell you when the time is right. I feel like we just know when we come to that.
And as to go off of, forgiveness, I think that we can do that with ourselves as well. Oftentimes we find it very hard to forgive things that we've done in the past that maybe we're ashamed of, or, we're feeling very guilty about. But when we forgive, we're not saying it's okay that I did that, or that I hurt that person, but we're saying I was acting in a way with the tools that I had, and the knowledge that I had. And now that I have more tools and more knowledge, I know that that's not okay. So I forgive myself for what I did, just with the understanding that I had at the time. But I know now that that's not okay, and I would never do that again. So you're giving yourself that, I guess, another permission slip, to let that go, even with the traumas with ourselves that we've inflicted on ourselves, to say it's okay. Maybe not the thing that we did was not okay, but we didn't know any better at the time. We didn't know what we know now here in the present. So let's forgive that girl, that guy, whatever, in the past, because there's still, if there is no time, it's still happening, so they can still receive that love from yourself in the future, basically. But anyway, any final thoughts? This has been a wonderful discussion. This has been freaking amazeballs. I'm feeling so grateful that you guys have been able to join me on this. And I know that you're all in vastly different time zones, especially at least it's probably like 3 a.m. or 5 a.m. over there. But thank you guys so much. But any last words? Any last words? Everybody who is watching this video, thank you so much for hanging out with us, for listening. And like I said, if this spurred a discussion in you, please post that in the comment section down below. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to see your points of view so that we can engage in that discussion. And so if you want to find out where any of these lovely ladies are, all of their links are down below. But thank you again for joining us and taking a look into our higher self. This was a 3-part series. So again, please go back and check out part 2 and part 1. All right. Thank you guys.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.